Okay, people online, you're very welcome to PPI, on the PPI Journey. My name is Helen Murphy, I work at the PPI Ignite Network. So, without further ado, let's proceed to the business. This section is about setting the context for today, setting the context for the event that we have. Today is about celebrating the Public Advisory Board in the PPI Ignite Network. It's reaching the end of its 3-year term. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But to say that we have worked together, this is the organising group for today's event. We have 4 people here on the top row who are members of the Public Advisory Board. They worked with Edel Tierney, who is from Tusla and has been very closely involved with the PAB, Public Advisory Board, over its lifetime, and with 3 of us from the National Office. So this organising group have worked together to plan and think about what today is about. And the key themes that emerged from our planning was that we want to focus today to be on fun and humour in PPI, that we want to, particularly in our workshops, look at building skill sets to empower the public to become active contributors with researchers and empower people to become involved. And also we wanted to link in with the overall theme for the National Festival, which is around celebrating our history and embracing our future. And as we began to talk and plan, it became very obvious that everybody feels they've been on a journey. And that's what fed into the title of the event and our subtitles, Learning from the Past, Stories from the Present, and Aspirations from the Future. So in preparation for today, we really wanted an event that was looking at PPI through the eyes of the public contributor. And one of the things we thought we would do is, rather than have big long biographies of everybody, that we would put together a short information sheet which contains a couple of lines that everybody gave us describing themselves in the context of today. There's a QR code here and it's available from the calendar of events as well. So, what are we going to do today? So here's our agenda. I am trying to set the context, and we'll have our first keynote now. And then we have 3 case studies describing the journey to here from around Ireland.
Sorry, Helen, can you go back to the QR code? I missed it.
Yep, so we'll go back to the QR code for a minute. So after our 3 case studies, we will break for lunch, which is going to be out in the foyer area. People online, we will break for lunch, and people online will rejoin for workshops at 2 o'clock. There's an online workshop being delivered by colleagues from the University of Limerick at 2 o'clock. And for people here with us, are we good to move on? We will have at 1:30 outside a surprise team building energizer led by John Mitchell, who has kindly come to join us from Barrettstown. And then at 2 o'clock, we have 3 different workshops. And we come back in here at 3:15 to look at the future, the road ahead. So, from my own point of view, I suppose, as I thought about today and sidebar, I want to make one point here that we have used the term public voice. Many different terms are used: the public, the patient, service user, the PPI contributor, a person with lived experience. They're interchangeable. Use any other term that's appropriate. And I suppose just last night, a few of us were talking and we were saying the word person with lived experience is actually getting great traction now, but all of these mean the same thing, and today we have used the word public voice for the context of today. So, in terms of my thinking about today, I titled this in the beginning, We Had a Dream. But when I began to think about it, from my own point of view, I suppose I reflected on how I had got involved in PPI. And I realised it brought me back a lot further than the Ignite programme. And it brought me back to years ago. I was an athlete, I was in a local running club. And when I was around Galway, if I saw a woman out running, I knew her, because there were actually only 6 women in Galway who ran. So I realised this was very odd. And I had some friends whose husbands were runners, and I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea if? But the first thing I did, and I can still remember the night I went over to her house, I sat down with one of my friends and I said to her, I'm thinking about setting up a group for women who have never been involved in sport, never ran. Do you think that would work? So she was really enthusiastic, and with some other friends who had similar profiles, we began to plan something that would be liked by and enthusiastic and taken part by the cohort we were trying to meet, and the Galway Meet and Train group was formed. I'm carefully not putting in what particular year it was. This is a picture from quite some time back. When you get the slides, you can spot me in it. And this was my first introduction to working with people to see what they wanted and delivering from there. I led it for about 3 years, and I suppose now I could say I empowered, I certainly didn't know the word then, somebody from the group who had never led anything, took it over and led it for about 7 or 8 years. And actually, ultimately from that group, for anyone who's in Galway, the person who set up the Galway Fit for Life emerged. So I think if I was doing an impact case study, I'd have lots of evidence for that. So from there, I did work also in the IT industry, where I was always at that intersection between people with a lot of technical knowledge, the software developers, and the end users. I came into research probably through a non-traditional route as a program manager. And I suppose when I started initially, I was aware of kind of the isolation of academics doing their research and how far removed they were from the people they were doing their research on. But for me, probably the light bulb moment happened the first year that the HRB put into their call guidance when they were about to launch, or when they were launching a new funding call. And in it there was a line that said, please tell us how you're planning to involve the public and patients in your research. And I remember the PI, I was helping somebody to do the grant at the time, and there was kind of a bit of a, ooh, what's this? And I said, hey, I think I've got this, leave it with me. And I actually looked through my email to prepare for today, and I found an email from 2014 that I sent one evening to Andrew, who was the principal investigator. See attached a rough outline of how PPI might work. And I said, look, we need to talk about it. We need to see what exactly go into it, because I think at the HRB midterm review, we need to be able to show we have implemented our user involvement plan. And when I looked at the attached document, I realised that in it, I had actually said, well, this is who I think the who are. This is where we might have impact, and it had some of the things we're all familiar with now, study design, the information sheets, the study logistics, and so on. And I also had a proposal on how we won't scrutinise that too closely. Things have developed a lot, let's say, but it wasn't far off the mark. So that was 2014. That actually led to the funding application was successful for the HRB Primary Care Clinical Trials Network. And within that group, I was lucky enough to get a position working with them. And we set up the Primary Care Clinical Trials Network PPI group. This is a photograph from the first meeting we had, and I'm delighted to say that there are people in the room and people online who are still part of that group, and that I think was February 2016. So I moved on from there, and then this is where the dream around Ignite started. So in 2018, the first phase of this PPI Ignite programme, which was about trying to change the research culture, began. Sean Deneen was the leader here in the University of Galway, and I was the programme manager. And as we were planning it, we felt we couldn't have an initiative in this space without having some kind of a, wasn't sure what we'd call it, group of the people that we were trying to bring the change for. So, drawing on our previous experience, Sean had already done some work, a lot of work, with young people with diabetes, and we'll hear more about that later. So, putting our heads together, we realised that we were trying to change the research culture. So, this wasn't about impacting a research project, but we had probably a gut instinct to set up some kind of a public advisory panel. And hey presto, our Galway public, well, it wasn't hey presto as we all know, but we did set up a public advisory panel that worked with us, and it was a real journey of growth and learning all around. And Edel Tierney, who's been mentioned already, helped us with this. And again, here's a photo from one of our first meetings, and again, there are people here who are here in the room, and you will hear from them today. So, this was when our dream was tested first, and therefore it was natural that when we came to lead the PPI Ignite Network, that we would follow the same idea. And we took guidance and advice from the Galway group when we were beginning to plan, and we worked with researchers and some other people from around the country to set up the Public Advisory Board. That was one of the recommendations from the Galway people, that really at this level we were going to talk about a board, and we developed a strategy and a process to do it. We put out an expression of interest, and critically, we identified the key diverse voices that we wanted in this Public Advisory Board. And the emphasis was on individual contributors. Elsewhere in the network, we had patient organisations, we had community organisations. So this was to include individuals who were working in the space, had PPI experience, and those new to it. And we were particularly keen to include people from diverse backgrounds around Ireland. And we wanted people from all around Ireland. And that we would work to, that this group would have a 3-year term of office, that it would work with us, meaning Sean, myself, and we've had Casey and John Gaffey working with us at different stages in the national office, and the aim was to influence the network's programme of work. So this is the context within which the Public Advisory Board was set up. So why today? Why on the PPI journey? Well, it's very much around acknowledging and celebrating the contribution of the PAB over the last 3 years. It's about giving us all an opportunity to have an event driven by the public voice, as I mentioned earlier. And now, as the phase 2 of the PPI Ignite Network draws to a close, and there's a new phase beginning in March 2026, it's a good time to celebrate the progress with the PAB and overall, to reflect on what has evolved, and to think about the future. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a story in terms of where we're at. And without further ado, we set up our PAB. We had 11 members. I'm delighted to say that all 11, now we did have 2 people who dropped out for various different reasons, and we had 2 people came in mid-term, but all of the 11 current members are contributing to today in some way. So, without further ado, I'm going to let you hear from 4 of them. So bear with me now.
The PPI Ignite Network is changing how research is done, ensuring that people with lived experience have a genuine voice in shaping it by collaborating closely with researchers. Let's hear what some members of our Public Advisory Board have to say about their involvement in the network.
The impact of my being a member of the PAB committee was very positive, and it allowed me to learn more about research involvement, what research is about, and also encouraged me to bring that knowledge and understanding to the migrant community to build the trust between the community and the researchers.
In May of 2022, I availed of the opportunity to join the Public Advisory Board of the PPI Ignite Network. It gave me an opportunity to meet a group of like-minded individuals who share a common goal, and to avail of the opportunity to give something back. 3 years since, and I can look back fondly at what we have been able to achieve during our brief time together.
I got involved because I had been doing research grant reviews for the and the Health Research Board, as a layman, which is interesting. But I must have been on some websites, and then the PPI Ignite contacted me, and I kind of joined up with them. It's enriched my life, certainly. I'm actually a weirdo, so I'm living on my own, and after all, you'd like some sort of something to stimulate the brain cells, so that's what it does for me, and keeps me occupied, and I find it fascinating, very interesting. Yeah, and the great thing is that I'm part of it, only as a lay person, but I want a lay person's contribution, you see.
Serving on the Public Advisory Board of the PPI Ignite Network has been an incredibly rewarding experience on both a professional and personal level. It's given me much deeper insight into the challenges and opportunities within the research landscape, and in turn helped me to develop new skills and confidence that I will carry forward. The experience has strengthened my role as an embedded patient researcher and broadened my perspective on how I can contribute more effectively to research and beyond. And most importantly, it's been a journey of growth that I know will continue to shape my work into the future.
The challenges that I encountered in being a member of the PAB is, first of all, the language that is being used is very, very hard on a high level of education. Researchers use a certain language that I was not very, very familiar with, which I struggled with. Secondly, the timing of the meetings would not really fit in very well with my time, so I may have missed some meetings that are important. And third, also building the trust between the migrant community and the researchers was quite very tricky, but I was able to do that and slightly improved it.
So the PPI Ignite Network has reshaped the Irish research ecosystem by embedding the public voice throughout every stage of the research process, from initial concept to translation into practice. This approach has made research more collaborative, impactful, and aligned with the needs of the community. And crucially, it's cultivated a new generation of researchers who view their work through the lens of those who benefit from it. In doing so, the network has enhanced research quality while ensuring it remains relevant, inclusive, and responsive to real-world challenges. And with momentum and PPI now created, it's essential not to lose pace or focus, but to build on the progress and lessons learned to ensure future growth and sustainability.
The largest challenge that the Public Advisory Board had and was going to have was how to make a meaningful impact. What this would look like, what shape it would take, and how serious it would be taken. Could we make a positive impact? This we were adamant that it would, but we needed to ensure that we had buy-in from all elements of research, from the universities, professionals, and the practitioners, which we managed to do.
For further information on the PPI Ignite Network, please visit our online hub.
Excellent. So I hope that gives you a flavour of the variety and the members of the PAB. So we'll move on now to our first keynote speaker. I get the slide issues sorted first before I introduce him.
Break a leg.
So I'm delighted, and I genuinely mean that, to have the opportunity to welcome Cameron Kieran to present our first keynote speaker. Cameron is a PPI contributor, a member of the PAB, a PhD student in physiology, project coordinator of the International Diabetes Federation in Europe, and those few words don't do any justice to Cameron. So I'll hand over to Cameron and let's hear from him. Thanks very much, Cameron.
Thanks very much, Adele. I think I'm definitely shorter than the average person, so I might move this down. Perfect. So thank you so much for inviting me to give a keynote address this morning. I'm hopefully going to take you through a little bit of my journey within PPI and some reflections I have about being a part of the PAB, and also some kind of looking towards the future. Why is PPI still important, and why do we still need to have conversations about it, and how do we do that as a collective, a collective group of both PPI contributors, researchers, and public entities and institutions. But I wanted to start with something first before I go on to the slides. And it's something that I think we're often afraid to have a conversation about when we talk about PPI or PPIE or engaging with people outside of a research structure. And that's the concept that it's okay to not know everything. We don't have to do things in this world, in this PPI kind of chasm of knowing everything and knowing how to do it. So much of what we do in PPI is learning together, figuring things out as we go, and being open to new perspectives and new ways of doing things. And that's hopefully the sentiment I want to capture today, not only how PPI has changed since I started a number of years ago, but how we also changed with it. So I'm kind of exposing myself here, but I wanted to go all the way back to why did I start in PPI, and why did I start, I suppose, along this journey. That is myself and my twin sister and my family up on the top. That's right about before I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, maybe a year or so before I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed in 2011 at 16 years old with a life-changing condition that I knew nothing about. In the health service in Ireland, depending on where you're based, you may be put into a paediatric system or an adult system at 16 years old. In my case, I was diagnosed in Sligo, and the system there was that I was considered an adult. So I was diagnosed at 16, straight into an adult system that was not designed or set up for young adults or young people like me. I spent a vast majority of that first number of years of diagnosis going to clinics where I didn't meet anyone else my age. I didn't meet clinicians that really understood how to talk to young people about diabetes. A lot of the conversations that I was having with people at clinics where they were dealing with complications around managing their diabetes, or they were living with type 2 diabetes, and we had completely different experiences. There was a level of stigma of, why are you here? You don't look like someone with diabetes. You don't look like you live with this condition. And all within that space of that year, I was then moving to university. And so my parents were just had a child diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Then a year later, I was saying, okay, I'll see you now. I'm going to go to Galway and go to university. I didn't know how to manage my diabetes. I didn't really understand what it meant. There was very limited resources, very limited access to I suppose, space and encouragement from peers, from people who understood what I was going through, and also from people who understood what living with diabetes for the rest of your life was going to mean. And I had to try and learn how to live with that, but also navigating a healthcare system that really wasn't designed for young people. I'm not saying it's perfect now, but some of the work that we've done, hopefully the last 10 years, has helped with that. But it very much sparked something within me of, I was really frustrated about what I was dealing with and navigating living with diabetes. But I was also really frustrated that I didn't know anyone my own age. I was coming to university and trying to navigate, how do I have conversations with peers about diabetes? I didn't want to tell people that I had diabetes because I didn't want to seem different or something else or othered. But it was an important conversation I needed to have. And then in about 2012, 2013-ish, I can't remember the exact age, Sean, you might remember more than me. My mum called me one day and she said, I've seen a poster for an open evening for young people with type 1. I think you should go along because you might meet someone that lives with type 1 that's your age. And that's what started my journey with the D1 Now project, which was one of the first kind of flagship projects in this part of the world around including young people in research through a PPI lens. That picture kind of beside the picture of the human brain in person, that's a picture from that initial evening where we came together. There was probably around maybe 20 young people, give or take, that lived with type 1 that came along. And we had really no idea what the project was about. All we knew is that it was about diabetes. They wanted to hear from people like us. And my mum was calling me every day to see if I was going. So I was going. And I went there with no expectations. I went there purely because, well, I'm going to have to explain to my mother why I didn't go. But also I might find someone here that lives with type 1 that I can actually connect with, who's my age, who understands what I'm going through. And what that sparked then is the last 12 or so years of being involved in various different PPI projects. Within the D1 Now project, we set up a youth advisory panel, or adult panel, from that initial meeting where there was around 8 to 10 over the course of those number of years, young people living with type 1 who shaped and influenced what the D1 Now project looked at. And that was specifically looking at how do we improve healthcare outcomes for young people living with type 1. We wanted to hear from young people, we wanted to understand their experiences and figure out how we did this together. We certainly didn't, and I think Sean, you'll agree with me, we certainly didn't know what we were doing most of the time. We were certainly kind of navigating that together. One of the biggest examples I always talk about is for the first year of meetings, the team that were organising them were convinced that because the diabetes centres would tell us that too many carbohydrates are bad, they found this pizza place that made these thinnest pizzas. And that was we got to the year review, what's going well? We were like, we like the meetings, we like people. What's going wrong? The food is terrible, change it. And so we navigated all those different things. We had a conference where we organised it with young people around called Strength in Numbers, around the work that we were doing. We were part of a documentary showcasing what PPI was. We were part of publications, we were part of conference presentations. We were embedded in every possible way that the research team could think to put us or have us involved. We were there. And the core of why we were there wasn't that we were going to get everything right, but it was that they understood fundamentally that if they wanted to do a project that looked at improving healthcare or life outcomes for young people with type 1, then the only people that should be directing and leading that is young people with type 1. And I think that when we take that approach, sometimes within the research world, and I say this as someone come to the end of my research career, 2 weeks hopefully I'll submit my PhD thesis, it's sometimes a little bit of a hard thing to give up that control and to hand that over. And I think, we had a wonderful example of being able to do that here, where we were led and co-led by each other. We created relationships, we created trust, we built a space where we could have open conversations, where we could tell each other, that food is terrible, I want to change it. Or we could go, I really disagree with what we're doing here with this project, I think we should look at that. And that has built, I suppose, a life for me over the last 10 to 12 years of being involved in various different PPI and public initiatives. I'm very fortunate that I've had so many incredible opportunities that came truly from a conversation with my mother about go meet people that are like you, and please go make friends. But it has allowed me to take leadership roles and spaces in places that maybe people who have my experience and my background would maybe never have been. Some of the pictures here I have is I've had the opportunity to speak at the European Parliament about young people and diabetes and what we want to see from a European perspective. Up in the top right, just this July, we met with the Commissioner for Health and the Commissioner for Intergenerational Fairness as a group of 10 young people from Europe. What did we want from type 1 diabetes in Europe, and what did we want the commissioners to do about it? Alongside that, I've been fortunate here in the university to run and be elected as an education officer. I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that if I didn't have the experiences within PPI and having the opportunity to have access to so many people and skills and trainings in order to be able to speak like this in front of people. I think, if I look back to that first initial conversation, all those years ago in Jigsaw where we met as the D1 Now Youth Panel, I barely said, 2 or 3 words to people. I was so nervous, I couldn't speak in front of people. And the beauty of PPI is that it allows you to develop and grow into that. So you're not just creating impact on research, but you're creating impact on people. And some of the other projects that I've been involved with, particularly around young people, you'll see a lot of my experiences around youth and youth engagement. One of the other projects I've been very fortunate to be part of is around a global solidarity, global youth project across 22 countries across the world, where we've looked at how do we want young people to be engaged in global movements, in climate action, in climate justice, but also in conscious leadership, leading through empathy. And we've been very fortunate, I've spoken to some people here about this, that the MasterCard Foundation funded that project for the next 10 years for $10 million, so that we can encourage and include over 2,000 to 3,000 young people over that next 10-year period to continue this work. And I'll touch back a little bit about that towards the end of this, around kind of sustainability and why that's important. But I wanted to talk a little bit about why we still talk about PPI. And it's because it's more than just research. I think we've heard from the video and hopefully from some of my experiences that it is also about community, and it's about inclusion, and it's about finding a place where you feel wanted, you feel valued, and you feel seen. And if we have research in healthcare that doesn't include the public and patient voices, then we don't have what really counts, and that's the human side of things. It's about power too, and it's about sharing it, moving away from the idea that research is done to people and not done with people. And being a part of the Public Advisory Board has been one of the most rewarding things I've got to do over the last number of years, where I've seen ideas from people with lived experience shape research projects in ways that make them genuinely better and more relevant and more sustainable. But I'll also be honest, it's not always easy. And I'm not here to say that PPI is really easy and it's something that you can wake up tomorrow and just get everything right. We've had to navigate lots of usual challenges, managing expectations, making sure involvement is meaningful and not just box-ticking exercises, but also figuring out what does true partnership really look like. And the answer to that is that it's different in every single project. And unfortunately, we'd love to have a one-size-fits-all model, that this is what true partnership, and you do these 5 things, and we're good. But it's actually more of a conversation and a community building exercise in each of the different projects. And I wanted to give one example of a good example of one of the pieces of work I did within the Public Advisory Board with the RCSI, Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland PPI office, where they looked at the PAB, the Public Advisory Board. They were doing a project on how do we include lived experience in the review and I suppose, assessment of ethical applications. It's a very niche area. It's not something you would necessarily think PPI or lived experience would want to be involved with. But they looked at the Public Advisory Board and they looked at the experiences and background that people had. Myself and Mandy, who you saw in the video, have experience in these areas in research. And so they worked with us in a way that suited our schedule, in a way that really meaningfully included our voices, but in a way that they were led by us and we were led by them in terms of navigating what this could look like. And it was an example of clearly looking at where do we have expertise and where does the lived experience have expertise? How does that work together? How do we make this work along to everyone's schedules? And how do we end up with a product at the end that actually everyone is really happy to stand over and say, I feel reflected in that? But I wanted to touch back on the challenges a little bit. And I think sometimes we talk about the negatives and it's important to flesh those out. But some of the things that have kept me going in PPI are really reflective conversations and questions where we sit together and go, okay, well, what worked? What didn't work? What can we do differently next time? And how do we honestly reshape a program or a process after we've done something without being too critical or too negative, but also being open and honest and saying, okay, well, not everything worked and we can do this together. And that brings me on to why we still need PPI. I think we've done a lot of strides. When I started over 10 years ago in PPI, it was very much a kind of a consultation process. It was very much if we give someone an application and say, review this, and they come back to us, then we've done PPI. That's not accepted now. There's lots more ways of what we do to build in PPI, but it's still important to have those conversations. We need to keep building bridges because there's still gaps, diversity being one of those, bringing in voices that aren't always heard, not just the usual suspects, and I'm guilty of that, so not just my voice in lots of these conversations. And some of the work that I've been doing over the last number of years is to try and build more sustainability into the youth voices coming through into PPI. I've spent a lot of the last 10 years being the youngest person in the room. I'm glad to say I'm not the youngest person in the room today, which is great. But I want to see more of that. So how do we keep building diversity and building in those voices that we don't usually see? When we also talk about value, recognizing lived experience as a form of expertise, but also balancing public and patient voices. We very often look at lived experience as lived experience of a particular condition, when we don't look at lived experience that we all have within daily life, that we can all contribute outside of our researcher hats if we wear those to these types of projects. We all live life, we all live different experiences, we all have different backgrounds, different values, different morals, different ways of viewing the world. And that's important when we talk about enriching research. So it's important that we balance that and we don't overburden. Going back to that usual suspects, we don't overburden people and we create opportunities for many. One of the things that I think is really important to talk about is sustainability. How do we make PPI something that lasts and isn't just a short-term situation? I've spoken to Adele and others about this. How do we move away from the chicken and egg scenario of we have a project, we need someone to review it. We don't have a PPI board because we don't have a project. And going through this endless cycle of not having pools of people or spaces where people are empowered through conversations, through action, and through organisations like a public advisory board to have access to PPI and public patient voices when needed. Of course, there's still challenges. There's challenges around tokenism at times. There's challenges certainly around payment and how we remunerate and how we compensate the value of lived experience. Some of that is state infrastructure, and some of that is also research opinions institutions, and it's a conversation that we need to have together. How do we move away from consultation being the only source of PPI involvement? And how do we keep people engaged and supporting them long term so we don't continue again that chicken and egg situation of when to bring PPI in? And possibly the hardest one that we have to tackle, and I think we're speaking or preaching to the converted here, it's changing perceptions. There's still people who see PPI as optional. There's still people who see that as something that's nice but not necessary. And I think it's our job and the job of people in this room to keep showing that it's actually integral to everything that we want to do in research and in health and in world and in any sort of public endeavour that we are trying to take on. It helps us to lead to better research, better healthcare and better outcomes for everyone. Yeah. But before I finish, and I swear I will finish up, I just want to come back to something really, really simple. And that, for me, PPI isn't about getting everything perfect. It's not about having the right thing at the right time all the time, but it is about participation. It is about being curious. It is about being open. It's about being willing to listen, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about 16-year-old me being diagnosed with a life-changing condition, but walking into a healthcare system that's actually designed for young people. It's actually designed for people like me to be there. So my journey from a patient partner to being part of advisory boards to other projects that I've taken on has taught me that the most powerful change happens when people feel heard. So let's keep learning together, let's keep questioning, reflecting, and keep building partnerships that make a real difference. Thank you.
Tell me when it's 10
Thanks very much, Cameron. And now we're happy to take some questions from the audience, and we'll come to some online as well. Cameron, I'll leave you moderate your own questions. You're more than capable.
That's good, thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Cameron?
I can, yeah.
Will I wait for the mic or talk?
Maybe wait for the mic so the people online can hear as well.
Thank you so much for your speech today, and it really resonated with me. My name is Joan Jordan. I'm a bit older than you. I'm 53, but I got diagnosed with MS about 20 years ago, and so I have been involved with PPI in Ireland and Europe. I'm a UPATI fellow over the last 20 years. My main question is about, we've come so far, but I think now we really are at a roadblock with remuneration, and that it's particular to Ireland, that if you would like to work in research, you need to leave invalidity pension, which is what most people who have a long-term disability, I have multiple sclerosis and need my invalidity pension to live. But if I participate in a research project and are remunerated, and I do have 20 years experience, so I would like to continue with that. The situation that I find myself in is that I have to change to partial capacity benefit. So I don't know if you're familiar with the current situation. I think it's a no-win situation for people who genuinely want to engage in PPI research, and I believe very strongly there should be remuneration there. So can you give a comment on the current situation?
Yeah, absolutely, and quite aware of the current situation, and I think whilst this is not a new situation for anyone that is in receipt of any sort of benefits and wants to do this type of work, it is something that is only recently...
It is a new situation because partial capacity benefit was only introduced a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think that there's a piece missing.
For sure. And I think that's what we mean when we say is that the conversation around this and it coming to light for outside of the circles that it was already aware of I think is only just starting now, and I think it's a joint up conversation that not just institutions like this, but I think anyone that is doing PPI across Ireland, I think it's a joint up conversation that we need to have to put pressure on those that can change that infrastructure. I think it's also about redefining what we look at in terms of right now across the board for a lot of PPI activities, we, within institutions, educational institutions, it's very often we use a voucher system of giving someone a one-for-all voucher for participating, which for some people they're very happy to do that, but it's
an outload when you need bread and milk.
exactly, and it's also about looking at how do we compensate people in a way that fairly reflects the work that they've done, in a way that they are happy to be compensated. So for some people that is a one-for-all voucher, they're very happy with that. For some people it is actual pay into their bank account in a way that isn't restricted, and for other people it's access to different trainings or different educational courses that maybe they would like to take. So it is also about moving away from looking at how do we fix this as a one-size-fits-all model of here's how we pay people, but actually looking at how do we infrastructurally change some of those structural barriers, and that's a joint up lobbying exercise. Truly, I believe that. And then it's also about how do we have multiple means of compensation that fits into what a person who's contributing to PPI would actually like to receive for their work. And then it's also about, for the other side of the house, also being challenged on the fact that, when you go to a meeting, the vast majority of academics and researchers that are sitting there are paid for their time to be there. It's not always the same for the PPI contributors, and it's about also acknowledging that, albeit uncomfortable for some people in the room, that we have that open, honest dialogue and really kind of look at where the state of affairs are right now and how we then come together to, as I said, do that, I think, lobbying exercise to change those infrastructures, but also looking at how do we actually compensate people in ways that reflects what they would like.
Right answer, thank you.
Sorry, can I just comment on this, please? I recently wrote to a minister regarding this, as someone that has spent 13 years travelling the world talking about Alzheimer's and knowing the hardships of many of the younger people diagnosed today. I'm still waiting for a response, but as an optimist, I'm sure he will be writing back to me very soon, and I hope I will have some good feedback for you all.
Thank you. Is Martha, is there any questions online?
We have no questions online.
Perfect.
Thank you. Can I also make a comment on that current conversation? And you're absolutely right. Payments are really, really difficult, and the barriers in particular around social benefits are very real. One positive thing that has happened very recently is that the rules have been changed for people who are on disability pension, which is the highest level of disability. That was previously also ruled that you could not work either paid or unpaid.
Is that invalidity pension?
Disability pension.
I thought it was invalidity pension.
Is it invalidity? Okay. But that is the highest level then of, yeah. And that has recently been changed, only a few months ago, I think. So, that took quite a lot of conversations, that took quite a lot of getting into the Department of Social Protection, talking to people who are in a position to make these kind of decisions. It's obviously there is a much bigger issue, but it's a very first toehold, hopefully, to show that, if this works in one particular case, if there's a reasoning and a case for that to be made, then maybe that can be extended in the future.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? I think this will be the last question.
Hello, I just wanted to say my name's Autumn, and I loved your talk. It was really, really informative. I love the kind of models and the goals that you're setting, and I think this can work really well in other kind of models within other disciplines and with other health concerns. I wondered whether you felt like there was an opportunity for an organisation, a funder, such as Research Ireland, which is now so new, really, after the merger. That's not a merger, we're not supposed to call it a merger. to put some pressure and help with the kind of policies that this wonderful woman down here is trying to push with representatives? Is there a role that you feel a funder could play right now? That does seem to be an opportune moment for change within the funding landscape for Ireland, and I wondered whether you had a vision for that. And thanks again for the talk, it was great.
No, thank you. I think absolutely. I think, we've seen over the last 10 years where applications for funding have gone from never mentioning PPI to now having it as a core part of what a funder requires. But I think, in conversations around changing and shaping what the PPI landscape looks like, the more joint up thinking that we can do and the more collaborative working that we can do, and everyone pushing towards not necessarily the exact same vision, but a vision where everyone is included, I think is absolutely integral to ensuring that we have good quality, good access to and well-planned and well-supported PPI. I think having funders backing PPI as a core element ensures that not in every case, but in a lot of cases, that people have to think very, very long and hard about how are they going to do effective PPI. I think as well, funding up agencies and funding bodies, the HRB have been doing it and others for many, many years, have PPI contributors who review those funding applications, which is really, really key to, we're not just, it's not just about saying the right thing, but it's about demonstrating that you can do the right thing and that you can collaborate and co-create these spaces with people with PPI. So I think definitely there's room for more collaborative work there, but I think there's some really good solid foundations that funding bodies have done over the last number of years.
Super. Thanks very much, Cameron, for your contribution and for your wisdom.
Well done. Very good.
So, we're moving on now, and I'm delighted to welcome back to Galway Derek Stewart. Many of you have met Derek before, and when we asked Derek to describe himself, he sent through these words: born far too many years ago, always on the go, interested and curious, mainly these days about health research, following cancer and a mini stroke. So again, I'm delighted to welcome Derek and hand over to him here.
Thanks very much. And there I am. I put this in because as a child I was tongue-tied about this time. They went in for an operation. The mic's on? Oh, mic down. I think I'm sure to be on this one. Right. So when my parents took me back to the hospital, the doctors listened to me, and I never shut up from the moment I went in the door. The doctor said to my parents, "Do you regret us operating on one?" So it was a kind of early view of and cynicism of the medical profession. So my next slide. So I first got involved after my cancer. It's strange to stand here today and mark 30 years. If you had told me then I'd get 1 year, 5 years, I'd have gone, thank you very much. The fact that I'm here 30 years is surprising. But it's the experience of a mini stroke on my way to Galway that I want to base my talk around. I was trying to remember, I was talking to the driver about this place, but I couldn't remember it. I could remember it, but I couldn't say it. I could see it, but no words would come out. The strange thing was, oops, I've gone back one. The strange thing was, I could pick my phone up and type out misunderstood Heron, but I couldn't speak it. But even when I got on my phone, I couldn't say the words. I could see them, so I was confused, disorientated. I became a patient in Ireland because I visited Newcastle Road to the University Hospital. And they diagnosed a transient ischemic attack. And it's that moment when you realise they speak a completely different language to us. And they sometimes briefly call it TIA. But if we do a study and look at a study that says, we're looking at transient ischemic attacks. If you don't know what that is, you're not going to express an interest. And maybe they want the public's perspectives on that. So our role. But the other thing that struck me as I was thinking about this is that when we get involved with research, we wonder, what do they want to hear from us from? These are highly intelligent people. They don't need us at the table. And what happens if I speak up and speak out, especially if my clinicians round the same table? And I realised that's a bit like the mini stroke. But you realise that actually we've got our fingers on the pulse. We can find out things that they can't. And on those, on the issues that matter to the public, on the questions that interest us, not the questions that interest the researchers, but what are our questions, where are they being answered? On the points that might concern research participants, on the troubles they might find in recruiting to people. And if you think just for a second on that, studies in England on diabetes, and what they wanted to do was talk to patients in secondary care. There's about £5 million worth of research. The patient said, well, actually, it's ages before we go to secondary care. We're talking to our doctors. That's where you need to speak to us. Those trials would have failed to recruit to time or target. And patients said, stop. You've got to do these now. Primary care with phlebotomists and then primary care more than in secondary care. They changed them and they did recruit. But that would have been millions of pounds wasted. But also, we can put our fingers on the important aspects of findings. Because what we don't want, well, I want good research, but I don't want it left on a shelf. I want it applied so that it improves services and therefore makes my health better. Well, not me, but, us. So, first and foremost, and as Cameron's just said it, we're not there to know everything about what they do. I'm not one of them. That's why they're at the table, right? They don't need me to do their job for them. I'm not trying to be a lab scientist. I'm not trying to sit on their shoulder and say, oh, you don't want to titrate that with that. I want to talk about things that are meaningful to patients. But what I can do, and what I do become, is I learn more about what they do, why they do it, to understand why gathering evidence is important. I learn critical analysis skills. Newspaper report, media report the other day, breakthrough in our disease. Open the actual article, it's still in a petri dish. Fine, it's not petri, I'm glad, right? But it's going to take 10 or 15 years for it to make a difference. Our critical analysis skills. I think I develop better questions with public involvement. And I think I become a more informed patient as a result. So I want to talk for a little bit about, which was the topic of the conversation, but I needed to set the context, of the Health Research Board Trials Methodology Research Network. Now, for some of you might go, I'm happy to just work with an individual researcher. We change a light bulb, and it's brilliant, because the light shines, and that researcher starts to think differently. But ultimately, what would happen if we could change how the lighting was done in the room? How about we say to them, actually, you know what? If we open the doors, we bring even more light. So what I want to encourage you to do is get involved in more than one research study. Go to the darker sides, the research networks, data, because that's where we change it for everybody. This group do the research into the methods in how they plan and do. So if we change our method, we don't just change one light bulb, we change lots of light bulbs. So it's the encouragement to think about, and it's just called sometimes research on research. Come to being the writer. says that as a wee boy, he'd go from Enniscorthy up to Wexford. And he said Wexford was a place of wonder. He said it was an exotic place. It had a sense of elsewhere. And when I read that phrase, I suddenly realised that's what I feel like when I deal with methodologies. Because I often say, excuse me, can we stop for a minute? My head hurts. Could we just go back a bit? Could you explain that? Because if I don't understand it, how can I help others? But then I realised that that sense of elsewhere isn't just for me going to talk to them. It's for them coming to talk to us. They don't meet patients in the public. They've got no contact. So the idea of, do I talk to a self-help group, a support group? Is there a difference between those? So talking to us feels like them a sense of elsewhere. I'll come back to Colm later on. So I got involved with the priority studies. Those were studies looking at recruitment and retention studies. And what was great was they said, we don't know the questions we should be researching. I went, what do you mean you don't know the questions? Surely that's what you do. No, we're methodologists. We apply methods to get evidence on this. But we don't know. And suddenly the penny dropped. That is brilliant, because this is a level playing field. They don't know, and I don't know. So we can talk together. And the difference between a clinical researcher, because, thank you, clinical research often thinks that this new drug is going to work. So they've got a kind of bias towards it. Whereas methodologists are going, we don't know, we haven't a clue. So you can join with them, get involved in a far better way. If you don't know about the START programme, that's, and I've only just chosen 3 things. START programme is the opportunity for schools in Ireland. I keep knocking on doors in England to do this. I've failed so far. But in Ireland, young people are asked to become researchers. And they ask questions like, does reading a book at bedtime help you sleep? Does having a can of Coke help you do your homework better? You know, real questions to real young people. And then they come together for a celebration. And then the last one, because Ayla Quinn's up there, so I'll embarrass her. Ayla's doing the People's Review. She's doing a PhD. She went out, so to do a PhD you have to say, what's the research question? I don't know. Because what I want to do is ask the people what they want my question to be. So we went out and talked to hundreds of people, and they've come back, and basically it's a way of understanding what health reviews are about. Because if we listen to one study, and read one study, it's great, it provides evidence. But what's even better is if you can compare that with a whole variety of other studies. Because it's that comparison, that analysis, that actually provides an answer. So those are just 3 of the things that I'm involved with. So we already know about involvement in methodological research from the work in the Priority 3 study and Nikita Burke. Oops, good job, she's away in Spain at the moment. And she identified various things. So if you're getting involved in this sort of work, have a look at this. But it's about mutual learning and respect, relationships, thing that Cameron spoke about so meaningfully, about having those different perspectives, but also having both a safe space to talk about things. I'll quickly go to the site. When we were doing the rapid reviews one, I said, so what do you mean by rapid reviews? And round the table went silent. Oh, well, some of them are not rapid, right? And what we ended up doing was getting a definition of what we all meant by rapid reviews. Because if we hadn't done that and asked that basic question, by the time we got to the end of it, we would probably be disagreeing with research. So we developed the Sense of Elsewhere group book that's a roadmap. We're working on that now. If you're interested, speak to me later. Participants in a workshop said that involvement helps make sense, grounds the research reality, provides those perspectives, and builds and maintains trust in research. And that latter one, even more important today than ever before. I've already said those things. So come to Bean, what he actually said was, Wexford had a Woolworths, a bookshop, and a long street. And if you think of what's happened to Woolworths and the fact that we now use Amazon, so research is changing, so it's best to get in now. In terms of the bookshop, we've all got stuff on our phones and access to material. And the long street, I hope you won't be unlikely to meet somebody. I hope you meet people you do know. So I may have lost my speech, but in many respects, we've found our voice. But the last question, how do we help the others whose voices aren't heard, don't know they could be in this room, and if they did come in, how would they speak? I'm done.
Thank you so much, Derek. I've heard Derek so many times, and every time I learn something new and I hear some other phrase or words of wisdom that stick with me and that I spend quoting for the next 6 months, year, Derek. So we have our roving mics in the audience. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Derek at this point? And equally, I would encourage those tuned in online, please use the chat to enter any questions, and we'll go over to Martha to see if we have any. So anyone here like to ask Derek a question? And maybe I'll kick, oh, hang on, we have one here. Excellent, thanks, Ger.
The question of how would you support people who aren't in this room if they came in is really important to me. And it's important because as a PPI contributor, you are in some ways at the mercy of the researcher's invitation to get involved. And when you get involved, you're there very oftentimes in the role of an influencer, a very powerful influencer, but still an influencer. You're not an integral part of the research process yet. I think we'll get there, but we're not there yet as PPI contributors. But if we looked at PPI contributors' involvement as part of the human rights framework, how would that change things? Would that move us closer to being an integral part if that was accepted? I mean, health is accepted as a basic human right, so by extension, I think PPI contribution and involvement should also be accepted as that. I think that would change the face of it, but I'd like to know what you think.
I agree, Ger. I think I spend more of my time reading books and materials about emancipation, about women's votes, just about trespass, right, in the UK, the mass trespass movement. The Invisible Women is another book I've recently come across, because I think this is about democratizing research. Fundamentally, you have to ask a question: whose research is this? It doesn't belong to scientists. It doesn't belong to the medical community. It belongs to all of us. It's paid for by donation or taxation. And I think what we have to be asking for is, if we don't see our faces in amongst those groups and driving things, then it's not truly being inclusive. So I think it's up to people like me to move on and let go, let others in. I've tried to always be a teacher, try and open the door to others. But I think the human rights angle of saying, actually, this is about our health, and that is a human right. So I think we need to look more at that and read more in those than necessarily PPI articles. Did I just say that out loud? Maybe I shouldn't have done. Anyway.
Excellent, thanks, Derek. Have we any other question from the audience here?
I'd just like to say thank you,
Sorry,
Sarah.
I should have probably said, just briefly give your name and as you're speaking, sorry.
Sorry, Carmen Gagan, and I'm PPI advocate, and I just want to say I'm always inspired by Derek, and I think your words today were lost my speech but found my voice. So important, and thank you for all your work.
Excellent, and I think our online attendees are quiet as of yet, Martha, so again we encourage you to interact with us if you have some questions. So I'm delighted to hand back over to Cameron.
Thanks very much, Don. Thanks so much, Derek, for that. Our next session is with Prince, Kieran and Jackie, who Prince and Kieran are youth researchers helping Jackie from the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre at the University of Galway to understand social withdrawal in young people in the West and why youth work seems to be an effective way of helping these young people. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Hello, everyone. So I'm feeling a bit nervous, and I'm also a bit very excited and really hoping that I'll be able to do really good justice to the work that we've been working on over the last couple of months together. So thank you, Cameron. So my name is Jackie Murphy, and I am a researcher here with the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, and I'm joined by two of my brilliant youth researchers that's been helping me to lead a really important project. So Cameron, could you? So what we're going to share with you over the next couple of minutes is an example of how lived experience and empirical work can lead to evidence-based informed policy and practice. So our story begins with actually somebody who I can see up at the back of this auditorium, with members of the ETB coming to the university to say, we are seeing time and time again how youth workers are having really good success with engaging young people who are socially, well, at the time we didn't know whether it was isolated or withdrawn. We knew there was something, but we didn't really understand what it was that we were looking at it. And those brilliant people said to us, we know it's there, we know that youth methodologies work, we think we should do something to gather the evidence so that we can prove and get continued support to do it. And we were like, yeah, okay, this sounds really, really good. Because for us at the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, we always understood the power of youth work and engaging young people. But more importantly, we understood how youth voice could really help us to get to the crux of what it is that we needed to do. And so really luckily then, I was able to start to discuss a project with a team of people. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, there are lots of people here with us you can't see at the moment. So I'm just going to name out our youth researchers, if that's okay. So the first thing that we did with the support, once we got our funding, was put a call out through the youth workers throughout Galway, Clare, Limerick and Ennis. And we have 13 amazing young people that came forward that said, I think I know something about social withdrawal and isolation, and I think I can help. And so their names are Eva, Mary, Michaela, Hannah, Zoe, Pat, Amy, Joey, Tay, Prince and Kieran. And also who I am able to learn from is Dr. Charlotte Silk, Dr. Danielle Kennan and Dr. Bernadine Brady and the brilliant Gillian and Emily, who are researchers and workers here with the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, that said we are able to put youth voice at the centre of this work, but let's see how it is that we can do it. So, this looks like a straight line. As you all know in this room, there's nothing straight about it at all, but I want to explain how it is that we came upon designing this research. So we could not have done this project without strong advocates and champions of PPI. So from the very beginning of this research, I will say, I'll call back to what Edel said about embedding it in the process, because at each juncture, those within power had PPI at the centre of the process that they were doing. So namely, these would be the ETB officers that called for the research, commissioned it, but said that they needed the voice of the experienced at the centre of it. There was us, the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, that said, yes, we want to conduct the research, but we won't do it without youth voice being at the centre of it. And then luckily, the Department of Now Education and Youth, the principal officer saying there, yes, actually we see the importance of empowering youth voice to gain insight into what it is that we're looking at. So what did we do? We adopted, oh no, we're going to go back if that's okay. So we adopted a method where we called our youth researchers together and we set up a sort of youth, like research training, but at every juncture of our research process, our youth researchers have been helping us. So I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of it because I'm sure everybody here knows the joys of going through each of these processes. And I'd much prefer you to hear from Prince and Kieran about the experience of engaging with it. But just to kind of let you in for a little insight about what's been so important for us. Like at the very beginning, we didn't even really understand the concept of what we were looking at. And so Charlotte was able to go and conduct the literature review, go and see how everybody else was having this conversation, and then bring it back to us as a team of researchers where we decided how we were going to navigate it and to conceptualise it. And that's where our study actually changed from isolation to withdrawal in particular. We felt that there was something else going on there. We had a good day debating that concept. But yeah, and then at every other stage throughout the process, hopefully you'll hear how our youth researchers have been really helping to share it. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking next. So I think we said, Kieran, that I'd go to you next, wasn't it? So could you tell, I suppose, share with everyone here about your experience about becoming a youth researcher in a process like this or a project like this?
Well, it definitely was a new experience. I had never done something kind of like this before. I've been involved in the youth centre for like a while, since I was 13, 14. So for many years, I'm involved in different workshops, different projects, but nothing like this where I felt like my voice was heard. I gave different opinions. I would debate and work with other people, like and different people my age especially, to get our voice to be heard on these topics. Because with withdrawal young people, you can't just like read a book on it or read like a different article and just guess or like, okay, well, this is this percent, this is this, we can do this about it. You have to speak to people who have met people, who are relatives who are or have been withdrawn or isolated, and get their experience, their reason behind getting withdrawn, their reason behind getting isolated, and why they came out and what was like the reasons for this. And getting involved in this project, it was probably one of the best things. I felt like I've learned a lot, and I feel like I've put out a lot in that sort of sense where I'm able to give that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. So, Prince, I think we were going to talk about how you felt being involved throughout the process and kind of helping to shape each of these different stages as we went through the process. So, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So it started off very much like we just set the rules, made sure that everyone felt safe in the space, and from there we started discussing, like, even at the start, we weren't even sure, as Jackie said, whether it was like social withdrawal, isolation, exclusion, and there are plenty of people out there with experience and as good as like 1, 2, maybe even all 3. And when we settled on withdrawal at the first meeting, it was kind of like the next meeting we discussed how we go about it, and it was just, no matter what, the environment was brilliant. Everyone was always like listening to each other. You actually felt heard. And I suppose it felt nice to be able to like contribute, especially like in a system we're in today. Or even a few years ago, a lot of things were very, very different. However, just being around people, like-minded individuals, and trying to reach out to either like-minded or just the target audience, it's brilliant. Like, you know, it's just a great feeling, and I have loved it through the entire process.
Oh, thank you so much. So I would say that we have definitely shared our fair amount of not knowing and bad food. I think that is for sure is true. So I think that there has to be a real willingness when you're engaging in PPI as a researcher to, I think as other people have said, to leave your sense of control behind, because when you open yourself up into this kind of authentic experience where you really want to engage the voice, well then the process as you want to lay it out in front of you won't always happen the way that you want it to. And that leads me, I suppose, to speak about attention that's within this kind of research, and something back to what that we had mentioned about in regards to funders as well. And it struck me about what Derek said about, I don't know the question yet, but we had to spend so much time outlining the exact parameters of the research before we could get the money to engage in the participation part of the research. And that was really, really difficult because, you know, knowing where that balance was. And it was wonderful when I spoke to Del Murphy first about kind of coming on here, because I had said at the start, I was like, well, you know, it's not exactly youth-led, because we couldn't do it as youth-led because we couldn't do it until we got the funding. But I think Adele's response was, oh no, that's okay. There's many different levels and ways in which that you can engage it. And I think that openness to learning is really, really important in this process. So just to kind of speak about the effect of it, and then we might move on. So these are all of the different brilliant, amazing humans, even though they're behind kind of logos that have been helping us to share our research. But one of the main things that we started with this research was being so afraid that we wouldn't be able to engage young people who were withdrawn and who engaged in a process within our primary research aspect of it. And I remember at our last meeting together, we were actually saying, well, okay, so what about the sample and how many people would we hope we get in? And I remember Charlotte was saying, oh, well, you know, we're really hoping maybe 6 to 10 young people would come forward. We think that would be really good. And we were really, really hopeful. And then as we worked through the day, we decided, and I suppose at consent form, at ethics stage, at designing our questions, at designing our methods, our youth researchers have been shaping that for us. And then we decided, sure, why would we ever do a video? And I think that was something that you'd always said, was like, let them know who you are. Don't just come as a formal email with just like, you know, these names, like show them your picture, show them who you are, show them you're human. And so within the last kind of 40 minutes, we decided that we'd pull together a video. And I have to say, Quiva and Prince are amazing. So is Joe, our videographer, who created the video and edited it for us and did the subtitles, another one of our youth researchers. You will see how tiring it actually is as a research day when you see the state of me at the end of this video, but you'll understand. So Cameron, would you try and play the video that's up there? Is that...
The research that we are involved in is looking at social isolation and withdrawal in young people in Ireland.
And we will be covering youth work as well as its effects, how it can benefit those going through social withdrawal, as we too have experience in that. This study aims to explore youth work and how it can reduce social isolation.
And it's going to promote the perspective experience of young people and their lived experience. If you're between the age of 16 to 24, are engaged with e-work and have experienced social isolation and withdrawal in some point in your life, you would absolutely love to hear from you and just let me know what you have to say and just about your experiences. So if you would like to be part of this research, please contact your youth worker and tell you more about this and contact us.
As this is very important research, we have a team that would love your voice to be heard as part of this project, as the first project of this kind in all of Ireland.
My name is Jackie Murphy and I'm one of the researchers here from the University of Galway. So if you think that you would like to contribute your voice to our study, please have a look at our consent form and information letter and perhaps chat to your youth worker. We can meet you in your youth club, or indeed we could conduct the interview online. Or if you feel more comfortable just writing or maybe recording your voice or your thoughts to the research, we can help you with that too. We hope you'll get involved. Thank you.
So just as a success, I think, of you deciding to send that video off, we're going to have to actually call our cut-off date because of the number of responses of young people we've had to engage in the research. And I don't think that would have been possible without the work of our youth researchers guiding and directing us in what it is that we should have been doing. So I'm going to give last words to you, And you? Is there anything that you would like to add?
I feel like I'm very happy to be a part of this project and see how far it's come in like the months that have been following. And I think it's really great, like what you've been doing, Jackie, and like what all the other people I've been working with have been doing, and like letting their voice be heard. Like that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran.
I have absolutely loved being a part of this research. As like only a few years ago, I had no hope in the system. I had no hope that any kind of studies like these would be done. I had a lot more of a pessimistic view. And upon being part of something like this and just seeing even the small things, it brightened up so much more about my perspective. Just about like hope for the future and about people's voices being heard. Like, I was so happy I was able to contribute as someone with experience in social isolation, withdrawal and exclusion, and just knowing that we will be able to facilitate those in this project, like who've gone through similar, and hear their voices, you know, the voices of the youths. And I just love it.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Prince, Jackie, and Kieran, Phil. I think we can all agree that it's a really insightful project, but a really good example of how you can work with young people to create research that actually reflects what they want to see. We have time for a couple of quick questions, if there is any. Martha, is this first question online? We'll go to Martha first then.
Brilliant. So a question from our attendees online is, are there any methods you have used that could be used to build trust with other underserved communities that are not currently represented within PPI?
So I think my response to that was we were really guided by the Youth as Researchers model from the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre. So when we began to plan out this piece of research, that framework really gave me as a researcher something that I could use and see, okay, well, these are the steps that we could take. And I think that's at the centre of that framework is that I see Prince and Kieran here as co-researchers with me. So actually having the opportunity to speak at this conference was as important as getting the young people to engage in the research. And I think what's at the centre of that is looking at like how you must empower a voice before you can expect it to be able to contribute and to participate. So that would be the methodology that I would advise in that regard, or that we used, and it was really effective for us. Sorry, and I'm only yapping about, sorry.
We considered like every group when we were doing it at the start, we were like reaching out in as many ways as possible. Like we considered those with disabilities, language barriers, everything. That's why we have so many ways of reaching out to people in different communities and that would be, that would classify as, youths and that, be they just in the middle of nowhere. We have tried to make it as accessible as possible for them.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really inspirational. My name is Joan Jordan. I am currently working as an embedded researcher on the COB MS project. The principal investigator is Sinead Hines. What I wanted to talk to you about was the kind of chicken and egg situation that you have. You did describe that very well with what research question you're going to ask. You don't know what you don't know. You need to find out what you don't know. And it is a very difficult one, I think, with research. But I find a lot of the surveys that I would be given would give me options saying, are you satisfied, very satisfied, not, don't know. So they're very qualitative rather than quantitative. They're quantitative rather than qualitative. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because you actually asked people for their response, for their free choice, if they wanted to write it in a letter, if they wanted to, how they wanted to express themselves. So can you comment a bit on how helpful that was to have a less rigid format of input? Thank you.
So I'm going to just jump in there because the full answer to that is we don't know yet. So we're just at the stage of collecting the data from the young people now at the moment. So I think I kind of hear two questions or two things from what you're saying there, if that's okay. So the first thing was that like, how did we kind of start without a question but needing a question in order to get approval to go forward with it? Well, I would say that because PPI has become so embedded in many of the processes throughout our application processes and our ethics forums, we were able to say this will be discussed and decided upon with our youth researchers and we will change accordingly. And I think that's the work of PPI, has been influencing those just logistical structures, making it easier than for projects like us to kind of move in through and get permission to do the research. Then in regards to how our data collection will go, and is that what you mean, just in regards to how well will it serve to capture the youth voice?
It's just so open, the approach you're taking is so open.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah, that was one of the wonderful things that our funding partners and the Department of Education and Youth now allowed us to do, was to take a really qualitative case study approach to it. So we're not setting out to prove effectiveness or efficiencies, we're setting out to look at why is youth work so well suited to working with these young people who are withdrawing themselves from other formal structures. So maybe that's it is a qualitative case study. We're not setting out to try and prove anything. Yeah.
The best way is ask.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I have to admit, as a researcher, I was really pleasantly surprised that we had the funding support to go through with such a qualitative case study approach throughout Limerick, Galway and Roscommon. That to be able to do it that way was a pleasant surprise. But normally you're seeking efficiencies, and that's not what the study is about. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are at time now. So if you have more questions, please throughout the lunch and other times of the day, come up to Prince, Jackie or Kieran and have those conversations. I'm going to hand you back over to Adele now.
Super, thanks so much for that, and it is so wonderful to have had so many younger voices here today. One of the requirements from Cameron was that they didn't want to be the youngest person in the room, so I think we take that one for today, Cameron. So while we're getting into position here, I'm delighted now to move on to the next case study we're looking at, which is our own Public Advisory Board. So I'm going to hand over to our Public Advisory Board members and let you introduce yourselves and take it from there. So over to you, Edel Tierney and the partners.
Thanks very much, Edel, and thank you everybody who's here this afternoon. My name is Edel Tierney and I work for TUSLA Child and Family Agency. TUSLA is a national partner in the network, and I'm delighted to say I'm here in my capacity as co-facilitator of the Public Advisory Board, and three of our lovely board members are here today to talk to you about our journey as members of the PAB, to reflect on that, to talk about our motivations, to talk about our values and behaviours, but most of all to talk about the impact that we've had along the way. So I'm delighted to be joined by Carmel Gagan, Martin Quinn and Deirdre McLaughlin. So we've only got 15 minutes. We could spend a lot longer talking about this. So I'm just going to get straight into some questions for our Public Advisory Board that will give you an indication of our journey. But I know that these lovely members will be happy to talk to you over lunch as well. So Carmel, I'm going to start with you. What motivated you to become involved with the Public Advisory Board in the first instance?
Hi, everybody. I suppose I put my name forward when I saw it advertised because I had worked before with Edel Murphy and Edel Tierney from 2016 when we set up the Primary Care Clinical Trials Network. And I suppose, first of all, I've got to say that the way they work, I loved it. And like Cameron was saying earlier, believe it or not, I was very quiet when I came first. But they nurtured and encouraged me, and they made me the best advocate I can be today. So I suppose that's why, and I may also add that I did not get on in the first interviews. So that tells you the calibre that was there and the diversity. And just, it was a national movement, I felt, and we had come to that stage where it had, we just needed to empower people, and we needed to be powerful at a national level.
Thanks, Carmel. And we're delighted you made it on in the end. Martin, what about yourself? Why did you become involved in the first instance?
Yes, thanks, Edel. And hi, everyone. I think that I became involved really because of my involvement with a lot of different organisations. I have a huge background in community, and particularly organisations that have a community ethos like Muintir na Tíre and Citizens Information Service. And then I'm also an advocate because I suffered a stroke a number of years ago. So I'm an advocate for stroke and for the services surrounding it. So I think for those particular reasons, like, I felt that it was a very attractive opportunity, and it would be a good learning tool.
Great, Martin. Thank you. And Deirdre, yourself.
Well, good morning, everyone. So for me, Edel mentioned at the very start the PPI Ignite at NUI Galway. And I was part of that public advisory panel, and it was an extraordinary experience. I loved it. It was immersive. There was no doubt about it, and we just got exposure to so many PPI opportunities from such diverse groups. And I suppose too, I made some good friends as part of that public advisory panel, which was an unexpected side effect of it. But then when I did see the ad for the public advisory board, I suppose what motivated me was the people. To move forward with that, because of the people that were involved and that would be involved. Also, the possibilities that could arise from it, and I think the thought of the opportunity to embed PPI further in the research ecosystem was a huge driver for me.
Thanks, Deirdre. And as Edel pointed out in her opening speech, we were a group of individuals representing individual experiences, lived experiences, patient experiences, and I think that comes across today. Now, as part of our PAB, one of the original activities we undertook was to develop values and behaviours for the group. And this was very important for us. It was a way of structuring how we were going to work together and work around the table. So we used to start each meeting, and we still do start each meeting, with this slide. Please consider equality, diversity and inclusion. So that sounds good, but what does that mean? What does that look like? So we drilled down into that, and together we came up with a list of values and aligned behaviours. So this was how we committed to work together at each meeting. At each meeting we reminded each other. Edel and I asked that we be reminded of these values and of these behaviours at each meeting. So Carmel, coming back to you again, how do you think that these values and behaviours were embedded in the work of the PAB, or how did you feel that they influenced the work that we did?
Well, I suppose I'm 13 years, I think, now involved in PPI. It wasn't called PPI on my first project. And from the beginning, I always felt that guidelines and terms of reference, or yesterday was mentioned in Cork called terms of agreement, which maybe is a better phrase. But I think they're so important when you bring a group together. But then it's, when you get a very diverse group, it's adhering to them is essential. And I found over the years now, silos can develop within our groups, and we all work in different paces. And while I certainly find it difficult sometimes to keep up with the pace, and Derek had mentioned earlier that he gets pain in his head. Well, I get those pains. And I suppose I'm also a visual learner, so I get more from a visual, which is not always. So we can be slower. So that is so important that everybody is mindful that we're not all at the same pace. So we have to check in. And I just think, sometimes members become frustrated, understandable, that we're not going fast enough. So I suppose, that's where we have to keep going back to our guidelines and respecting one another.
Thanks, Carmen. And Martin, reflecting on these values and behaviours for you.
Yeah, I think that reflecting is a very good word and very important. I think the reflecting on the values and behaviours regularly, I think, is an important aspect. And I think that being able to look at them and ensuring that every voice matters, that would be something very crucial to me, that every voice matters, that one voice is not more important than the other, that all our voices matter together. And I think that's a very important part of reflecting on it.
Thanks, Martin. Lovely phrase, all our voices matter together. And Deirdre?
I'm thinking back to the words that Laura Ruth used when on the video. She talked about the language of the researcher and the community working with them. And for me, I think that the values and behaviours gave us a common language across the PAB. And even though there was huge diversity in the PAB, it gave an importance and it celebrated the diversity within the PAB. And I think it was Cameron that referred to the diversity within the group. It is quite a diverse group. I mean, you'll have seen flavours of it and you'll see more in the afternoon. For me, and I think too that the values and benefits that we had empowered us to stand up and speak. And Carmen refers to, you need to find your voice. I think those values and benefits really did support us, and it was a non-judgmental environment. So what you said, what you did, and people could live and grow on it. And I found that hugely helpful. And I suppose the last thing that it brought to me was, and so for me, I feel if you're going to participate, you participate. And then those values and benefits encouraged regular attendance, and that to me was magic.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you, Deirdre, and Adele will agree with me on this. We were amazed at the attendance rate for every meeting. We almost had 90% attendance at every meeting, which is quite unusual. For me, I suppose I would think of these values and behaviours as our protocol, if you want to use a research term. This is how we did our business, and we came back to that. And if we felt we strayed from it, we came back to it. So reflecting on Cameron's wonderful opening speech about PPI being impactful, but it also being challenging. I think we're not unique in that sense. There were challenges. I'd like to hear a little bit about those challenges, but also amidst those challenges, what was the impact that you feel the PAB had on the network and on the research that was being done? Carmel, I'll come to you again.
Well, I suppose sometimes maybe you look at us, the PPI, that are involved in any project, and you think it's all hunky-dory and rosy. And I'd just like to tell you it's not. And I suppose this summer really brought it all to a head for me. And I think the PAB, I was very hurt. And there were meetings, outside meetings, and I felt isolated, cut off, and probably just not part of the pack. And this wasn't the only group, because it had happened in a few groups. And I thought, and this really came to a head in Limerick at the summer school, where it was, for the first time ever, it came out on a panel, And I'm going to hurry up. But so I just think, sometimes we just have to step back and look. It's not about us. And egos take over, and there are egos, I can assure you. And some people think they're superstars. And all our voices are equal. It doesn't matter. And sometimes, I wanted to step back altogether. I'd had enough. I found it was exhausting. I was exhausted because I do have to work hard to keep up. And but then luckily, Helen, we had the break for the summer, and I thought, no, I'm not stepping back, because then they've broken me. And I'm not going to be broken, because somebody has to keep going. I'm not saying I'm great, but it's my purpose.
Thanks, Carmel. And just to say, acknowledging tensions within the group. This happens, as Cameron has already talked about in many groups. I hear learning in that it's important to stay involved, to not give up. Yeah. And really, really strong learning in that. Thanks, Carmel. Martin, for you, impacts, learning, challenges.
Yeah, I think the challenge really was that the rug was kind of pulled from under us, and how to cope with that, that's a major challenge for anyone. And each of us then had to deal with that kind of individually. And there's a learning in that, that to be at the table and to be able to have your voice heard is the most important thing. I mean, one of the things that I've always been saying after my stroke was that the patient voice was the most important voice at the table. And we can put that as the patient, and the public voice is the most important voice at the table and should never be forgotten.
Thanks, Martin. And I know that rug being pulled under you can leave you feeling, I suppose, reeling and not knowing what the future holds. And today we're here to, I suppose, reflect on our own learning from that, but also the impacts, and to celebrate the great work that we've done. And we really appreciate you speaking so honestly about this. Deirdre.
So I look at challenge in a challenge, I suppose, for me is something you've lost. So what did we do that maybe is lost? And what were the challenges that drove us to doing what we did? So I think it was, Robert, you mentioned, a group of like-minded people. A group of like-minded people can do an enormous amount of work. And when I look back on it, and I look to the HRB midterm review, and the PPI panel were asked, or the Public Advisory Board were asked if they would be interested in reviewing that feedback. And so we reviewed the feedback of the reviewers, and we came up with a bunch of ideas. And one of those ideas then was later turned into a Knowledge Transition Award that actually was awarded and is in progress at the moment. So that was brilliant. And I suppose down through the years we've worked on the building connections, and we worked with Laura Ruth and our group, and we worked with Muscular Dystrophy Ireland, and we also did fostering agreements, just that whole concept in PPI that you get the buy-in and whatever. And I'll slow down now. But anyway, so I suppose when you look at all that, and then I say to myself, okay, what was the challenge? So the challenge was, it's ended. And yeah, that's it. And I said it to Edel last night, I found when I was clearing out my PPI stuff, giving a whole file in the cabinet back to someone else, I came across the card that I received from Edel the first time asking me to come and talk about PPI, and that was in 2018. And I looked at that card and I thought, I'm so glad I kept it, because maybe the challenge is the end, but I'm hoping there's a new beginning of some sort for us.
And certainly we're going to talk about that in the afternoon, and I look forward to more. But to wrap up, and I realise we're at time, thank you, Casey, one word from each of you to sum up your experiences of the PAB.
Communication.
Martin.
I would say wonderful.
Deirdre?
And I would say impact.
And I would say thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our 4 contributors there. I think it's wonderfully refreshing to see such honesty. I think we all have a tendency when we come to present at public fora to put our best foot forward and talk about all the good things. And there were loads of good things, and I think that has come out from the videos and from what our 3 people here. There were so many good things about our Public Advisory Board, but there were challenges, and it would be not honest if we didn't acknowledge that. And I just think what you have done, the 4 of you, is top notch. It's really good, really refreshing, and I think really adds to the discourse around public and patient involvement. So, Deirdre, you can add that to your list of impact in terms of what we have done as a PAB. So, enough from me. Have we questions online or in the room?
Can I just invite everyone to join John Mitchell outside to shake it off at lunchtime so that we can, you know, get ourselves rebooted for the afternoon. So, John, thank you. We're looking forward to you helping us to kind of get grounded again. Thanks. Yeah. Any questions from the audience or online?
Jeremy, one of the PAB members, had his hand raised. He might have to come in online.
Okay. Hi, Jeremy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Jeremy, loud and clear. You're welcome.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, I've enjoyed and I've, you know, learned and so on from the PAB, but we kind of tend to be inbred, where we're all talking to each other, we all know each other. There should be, in my opinion, an awful lot more outreach, you know, into, you know, like to travellers, to immigrants or so, a lot more outreach. Otherwise, we just keep talking to ourselves and agreeing with ourselves. That's all.
Thanks, Jeremy. And can I say,
a really interesting point when we're trying to reach a broad audience or influence a network. Derek touched on it, so I think influencing a broader network is very challenging, and we've certainly learned from it. Thanks, Jeremy.
Jeremy has always reminded us of the need for diversity in our group, and we really appreciate him keeping us reminded of that particular value.
Elizabeth O'Farrell, also a member of the PAB. We seem to be taking over the place. I just want, there was some content missing from some of the responses from the PAB members, and I think it would be useful for people here and online to know that the PAB is finished its work as part of phase 2 of the PPI Ignite Network, and that's why some of the comments have come through by my colleagues here at the table. And just to reflect on that the new phase 3 of the grant will not have the PAB an advisory board as it was in phase 2. So thanks.
Thanks for that clarification, Elizabeth. Yeah, and important that we'll know more in due course about what configuration the public voice will have in the next phase. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Eva O'Byrne from the COB MS project. Really great panel, thank you all so much. I was really moved in particular by all your discussion of the challenges, and particularly what Carol, you were saying about the exclusion and the kind of the ego jostling and that kind of thing, and how you overcame that on a personal level. But my question for any one of you who wants to answer it, I suppose, is how can we deal with that on a more systemic level, retroactively? Because I suppose our values and behaviours are trying to lead us to kind of not
have that in the first place. But if we do meet those challenges, how can we address them so that our PPI panel feels supported?
Carmen, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I would say that I use the values and principles, and I've helped set up several PPI groups, and even in Europe. So we're doing so well here that we're asked for guidance in Europe. And one particular large funding group in Europe I have helped, and I'm very proud of it. There were difficulties with the group, with the PPI panel, and this undercurrent started. So we had to nip it in the bud straight away. And that's where we had our principles, and we just went back to them. Now, and you have to have a very strong facilitator. And I always like working with a really good facilitator, because that is where that nips all that in the bud in a lot, but you have to do it early. And of course, when there's strong voices around the table, but if we're not all equal and we're not all respected, you're going to lose people, and they may be what you think, is the weaker voice, the ones that won't speak up, but they may be the cherry on the cake you've just lost. So I would say get your values and principles in order, get a good working group, and you go from there, and just stick to your values.
Thank you so much.
Martin or Deirdre, do you want to add anything? Any advice?
No, just to agree, really. I mean, the values are the thing that will steer it, and it's important to stick to the values, as Deirdre mentioned there.
Thank you. Deirdre? Same as. I know we're coming up on lunchtime. I'm sure people are very hungry. If there's any last burning question, but I know we're all available to have a chat over lunch or outside when we're doing our physical activities. So do come and have a chat with us along the way.
Thank you very much. So, as we break for lunch, we're here now as far as our lunch menu, not too far behind time. For those online, you now have a break until 2 o'clock. There's an online workshop. We've got a separate Zoom link for that. That will be hosted by John Gaffey, our former colleague. So please tune in at 2 o'clock. For people here in the audience, lunch is outside, and at 1:30, as Edel already mentioned, we have our Energizer. So we will be kicking into action at 1:30 for everybody still in ILAS. So thank you very much for a fantastic start to the day.
Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself as well. So here we go. Elizabeth O'Farrell from the PAB. And maybe that's why we won't have a PAB in the Grand Phase 3, because my brain is getting too old. So now we're going to have a discussion called The Future of the Public Voice in Health and Research, in Research and Health Service Design. And I'd like to welcome the panel, Ger Halpin. Ger describes herself as having believing in access to proper health and social care is a basic human right, and she believes public and patient involvement in research should also be provided using a human rights framework. I'd like to welcome Dr. Anne Cody, who's head of unit for the HRB and a PPI system supporter. Very welcome, Anne. I'd like to welcome Yola Island. I'll never pronounce your name properly, apologies, but Yola is Assistant National Director, Patient and Service User Experience Lead at the HSC. And Professor Sean Deneen, everybody knows Sean, and of course Sean is the National Lead for the PPI Ignite Network and the HSC Clinical Lead for a National Diabetics Registry. And this is going to be moderated by Dr. Cliona de Vallis, who's a postdoctoral researcher here at the Centre for Disability Law and Policy at the University of Galway. And Cliona describes herself as passionate about ensuring disabled people's voices are included in research. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm really happy to be here with you this afternoon, and I'd want to thank everybody on the organising team for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to hear some of the sessions that were going on today. We heard earlier today about the journey so far and how we've got here. We've also really engaged in some energising team building sessions and some interesting workshops that I was able to see a couple of different bits on where I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I couldn't be in all of them, which was deeply disappointing. But as we move on from that now, we are looking to the future and the road ahead, I suppose, for public voice in research and health service design. And I'm going to come to the panellists possibly in turn. I might start with you here closest to me, Ger, and work my way down this time. And ask you about two of your wishes or key priorities for public voice in research or PPI in the future.
Well, I want to acknowledge first the work PPI Ignite and the HRB have done to embed PPI contributions and PPI as a concept and as a practice into the universities. I don't feel the same attention has been received by the public. Same attention hasn't been given to the public voice, to embedding it within the public realm. So I think what I would like to see is that there's a more effort made to bring awareness to the public of PPI, what it means for research, what it means in relation to health, and in particular to strengthen and diversify that voice so it'll have a real impact. And secondly, I think we need to shift the dial on what we call involvement. And I think we need to go to a place where we recognise involvement as a human right and we make it mandatory at funding level and we make it mandatory within the universities. That PPI is not an optional extra.
Those are really important. And you might even have skipped on to one of my other questions, but we'll leave that one for a second. I might come to you next, Anne.
Okay, thank you. That looks green, but it doesn't sound like it's on.
Can I help? Let's see. Oh yeah, there's a second button there. There you go.
Second button, okay. Thanks a million. And thank you very much for inviting me. I really loved the morning session. There's so much that rang true for me and reminded me of so many things along my own path as well. In terms of two wishes, we started out when I wrote the call document for asking for the first applications for PPI Ignite Phase 1. I talked about culture change and I said, okay, that's, you're part of that job. It's not only PPI Ignite, but PPI Ignite has a central role in this. We are much further down that road, but it's most certainly not done. So I want to see that. And that speaks to what you were just saying as well, that much broader view going beyond typical health researchers, going into, the maths and biostatistics and into engineering and into business schools and into all those other researchers that are also really, really important for health research and that are really needed to address questions that are important to the public or to patients. And the institutions certainly have their role to play in that. And my second wish is really around the power dynamics. And we've heard in the morning that the PAB will disband now at the end of this grant. But that does not mean that that's an end to the PPI involvement, actually. It's just a very different phase to it. And PPI contributors were involved in writing the application. There are numerous PPI co-applicants in the new phase, which had not happened before. There are involved at all levels of governance and in leadership positions across, again, somewhat different in different configurations and different sites. And yes, all this will need to bed down and will need to grow. But it's the intent is to shift that power dynamic further to a balance, towards a balance, and it's hard to reach complete balance, but at least we're striving towards it.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, I think. And in any situation, and you're talking about, you know, in grant writing, but also in doing it and actually exercising the project, where you're trying to make sure that you as the researcher, and this is one of my challenges, aren't the only one in making decisions, or aren't the only one in that, and giving up some of that power across different disciplines will be interesting, but really, really important, I think. And maybe quite challenging it's for some people. It was for me when I started anyway. Iolo, I might go to you next then, if you wouldn't mind. And you're coming at this from a slightly different perspective, I think, from the more service involvement or how to embed it in a different angle.
Yeah, I think for me now, having been working in operations all my life, there still seems to be quite a disconnect from the connection between research, patient partners, and actually making an impact on the ground. So what I mean by that is that, you know, does it actually change people's services? Does it improve services? How do we make that connection through? I moved down here from the NHS in Northern Ireland, and I would have met monthly with Queen's and with Ulster University, looking at the challenges within the HSC and asking them to become partners at that early stage, you know, and we need to get to a position where our patient partners and service users come to us with the issue and saying, this is not working, YOLO, you know, how can we change this? We then bring the universities on board to start looking at how does that research-based evidence come and work with us so that it then actually makes changes on the ground. I think that's really important from my side. You said two things. So the second thing that I had, and this is about language, and I've kind of talked about this before. I'm not a fan of the word involvement. I think we're on a journey, you know, and in my younger days as a social worker, we talked about consultation. We moved then to involvement, because involvements can be a little bit, a big bit, none at all at times. So it's a bit of a word that's not great. And then I would say you move into engagement, which is a bit more positive. But ultimately, what people have been telling us for the last year or so now is that we want to get to partnership. And partnership means something very different. You know, it means 50% of everything. You know, so we're not making any decisions or changing services without full partnership. And partnership from the beginning, not about bringing people in at different stages of the game when it looks good to tick the box. You know, people are there from the beginning as such.
Yeah, those are really interesting. So I'm kind of hearing about like a grassroots up feedback mechanism rather than also always being top down, and then that really feeds into the idea of partnership and power dynamics and some of the stuff that we've heard earlier. Sean, for you, would any of those kind of connect for you or?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that if I was thinking a few minutes ago, I should have probably sat in between Anna and Iolo, because I should have sat in between my colleagues on the right, because I feel like I'm transitioning or you know, in transition from the world of academic, you know, research driving PPI, and then what's very exciting is, you know, the sleeping giant of the HSE waking up to partnership working, and the work that Iolo has done. You may or may not be familiar with it, but it's really exceptional what's happened in a relatively short space of time, you know, bringing real energy into patient and service user engagement. So my wish list, when I thought about it, I would say that we have, if you had a pie chart of health, you know, it's health and social care research that we were tasked with, and that the network is still tasked with. But if you could imagine a pie chart of the work that has been done, it's been predominantly health research. I was at the chief academic officers. I'm not just name dropping, but it's relevant. I was at the CAO conference in Trinity last week or the week before, and I shared the stage with Cliana Nicalig. If she's known to any of you in the audience, she's a good bit younger than me, but she is an absolute game changer in terms of, she has developed, I would say in the Irish context, this concept of inclusion health. So she works in James's. She's an infectious diseases consultant by training. And she is close to getting recognition from RCPI of inclusion health as a discipline. So it's looking after the people who are on the fringes, the people that you meet on your way into James's as opposed to when you're in there. And any of you who've been to that hospital will know that there's a lot of deprivation in that area. And that's where the bad stuff happens, and she's kind of calling that out and addressing it through an academic route, but also just getting on with it and setting up a service that actually meets the needs of these people who are the most challenged in society. So that would be number one, to shine a light on social care and social care research more. And I think that was today's, there was a real theme around that today. I mean, the second one I think is for YOLO perhaps, and maybe myself, but within the HSE, it's such a big organisation, and there are pockets of sort of partnership working and pockets of excellence, and but we just need to try and figure out how to join the dots. I'm moving into a registry, data science kind of world, and the idea, I think, of building trust, that to me is the message. That's the mantra. We're not doing this because it just, because our funder tells us, or we're not doing it because it's kind of being done elsewhere. And, actually we're just, we're in a world of misinformation, disinformation. And if you build something with people, it just has more trust, there's more value in it.
Yeah, I could keep going and asking you questions for ages, but I've just gotten a note to say that we only have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to give people in the audience a chance, or attending online as well, a chance to ask you questions. But just as a kind of a wrap-up of that and some of the things that came up there as well, I think it might be interesting to consider what we call this sort of involvement and how we're doing it, and it's coming across in a couple of different ways, because from a disability human rights perspective, we will talk a lot about nothing about us without us and the motto of the movement and how it's a human rights based issue, but also we talk about wouldn't use this language. So it might be interesting to look at how language is used in different areas, so we can also map what is actually happening in different places and bring together all the different expertise of what's working and what isn't also as we go ahead. And hopefully that gave you some chance to think about your questions if we have a time to go to you now. So if you have questions online, we would love to hear them. We can go to you if you have more questions and if you have a chance to do it. I think I actually have a tiny bit more time for discussion with the panel as well. I have never not been a stickler for timekeeping. This is the first time that I've actually been early when I was doing something like this, though. So this is even going above and beyond for me. And then in that case, what I'd like to use this time for is if I could ask you all to give me one thing you would tell people who are thinking of getting involved in this space in the future from your various perspectives. Because, like we said, there's still a good chunk of people out there who aren't doing this, and I think it's a really important part of it. So I might actually get you to hand me up one of the mics when I start with Ger up here again, and then we can share them down.
I would say to people, be educated. Educate yourself about what you're getting involved in. Ask for capacity building if you need it. Reach an agreement that you are recognised and included as an integral part of the research team. Don't accept anything less. And know what your priorities are, and make sure that the researchers know what your priorities are. Make sure you know what their priorities are, and work together to come to an agreement that will meet everybody's needs.
Those are great, thanks, Ger. We might pass the microphone down. We'll share it for a minute.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with all of those points. Maybe from the perspective of a researcher who hasn't been involved in PPI before, it's scary. It's really scary. And certainly speaking from my experience of setting up a public review process in the HRB, we were very nervous. And I think you can prepare. and then take a deep breath and go and accept that it's not going to be perfect and that you just need to ask people what's wrong and help us getting this right. And, you know, it's having that humility of saying, I don't know, and I mean, this is what came out during Cameron's talk this morning and at various places throughout, that, you know, none of us go into this knowing all the answers and having everything right. And you need to get over this and just cede that little bit of control.
I love that. But also I think that's what makes it worthwhile, the not knowing everything going in. You get challenged and hear stuff you never thought about.
I just to butt in, I thought the presentation from colleagues in the UNESCO Child and Family was remarkable. Not only did they admit that they didn't know the answer, they actually didn't know the question, you know, to Derek's talk. That was very powerful. Yeah.
Just one thing.
Yeah, I don't think there is just one thing. That's probably the issue. You know, there's so many things. We've listened over the last 2 years to what patients and services partners are telling us, and they've said training is really important. So we've been working for 2 years now developing a portal, and the portal will go live hopefully now before Christmas, the first element of it. It's co-designed, taking 2 years of hard work, and it'll be a space where people can go into. So anybody who might have a conversation with their GP, and the GP might say to them, have you heard of working with the HSE, or do you want to be involved in your future care? And they can go onto the portal and they can start exploring what's happening. So that's going to be a game changer to hopefully attract people into the system. Historically, people working with the HSE have been people who have complaints. So they've come to the HSE because they're not happy with something. And you have to work through all that baggage, first of all, before you're getting the good, juicy bits and people get engaged with us. So that's challenging. People who are working in PPI here today are here for different reasons. They're here because they want to be here. They want to be part of their own health and future, and they want to make changes. We need to attract more people from the population to be part of that on a bigger scale. We've just recruited 6 regional leads. There's one in this location who's here today, Jacobo. And these are really important appointments because we will shape a governance structure in each of the regions. And what that actually means is that when people come to the portal and come to be part of the work moving forward, there's somewhere they can go, there's a connection, there's a person, someone they can talk to, there's training, there's learning. So, you know, for people who are coming here and want to be part of this, keep the faith. Keep the faith. We're nearly there and the future is really bright.
Oh, I like that. I almost feel like telling Sean he can't say anything now because that's a lovely note to finish up on because you stole the mic.
I have one thing to mention, and it's not to underestimate the work behind the scenes. So I think, you know, I was honoured to be at, or privileged to be at a grant holders conference in Athlone. Some people in the room were at it as well from the HRB, and I thought it was really nice, Anna, that one of the people that was showcased was a programme manager. You know, it tends to be the PI, the academic, you know, the kind of professor or whatever that's up there. But actually, you know, the people who make it happen are the program managers. And it takes a village or whatever. It takes as long to prepare for a PAB meeting. I don't know if the PAB members in the audience recognise this, sometimes longer than it does to deliver it. And I think just hats off to the 2 Idels, as I call them, you know, and I think that is something, to do this well, you can't just rock up and say, you know, we're going to do partnership. 2 years to build a portal, you know, to do it properly takes time.
Yeah, totally. I'd echo that, and they definitely do deserve a good amount of recognition for the work that goes into the background of it all to make it accessible and to make it actually workable. Okay, so now we have time for questions, and I'm not getting ahead of myself this time. Yes?
It's mainly for Anne, Yolo and Sean. What advice would you give to patients and the public getting involved in Ireland? Do you want us to be more demonstrative, more challenging? What's your advice to us?
So, what's the advice on how to get involved?
Any advice?
And any advice around this?
Should you be speaking louder? Things complaining?
Yeah. A lady who's still here behind you said this morning, that she's wrote to the politician, to try and get things moving. Reimbursements and payments is a huge issue. We've met with ministers, we've met with the health minister, we've met with, yesterday I was with Mary Butler, the chief whip. And there is a policy that was written a couple of years back, nearly 3 years ago, around how do we get to a position where we start paying people for their time. And it's still sitting, fortunately, at the departments. And none of the politicians are yet strong enough, I could say many things, but not strong enough to come out with this policy. And to be honest now, we've overtaken where we were then. 2 years ago, we've advanced so far ahead now. That policy, if it came out, would be dated. So it's not even, in a space that you can actually use it. But definitely the payments and the reimbursement is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Derek, it's a good question, as always, gets you thinking. I would say that in my experience, and Cameron described quite beautifully the work we've done with our young adults in diabetes this morning, but I think PPI is a team sport. I think going into it alone, that may work, but COB, MS COB teams are here. They're here as a team, and I think there is a kind of a vulnerability, perhaps that can. I've seen that happen, and I'm not even 12 months in the data systems world, but you can get burned out, and you need a support system, support mechanism around you. Again, I think the Ignite managers kind of recognise that, and there's an element. I don't know if Ger and others would agree, but I think, building your support system around you early, I think, would be important.
Yeah, and maybe, oops, I get the stop now sign. That's me, shut up.
You can finish the point, I think.
Okay.
You can blame me. I mistimed it earlier.
So maybe just that notion of having lots of different people at the table, that more bottom-up approach that we took in Ireland rather than a top-down one, and having so many different shapes and forms of PPI. Not everything is appropriate in all circumstances, and just that breadth and beauty of it.
Thank you, and thank you all for such a lively discussion, and for everybody for inviting me. So now I think I am going to hand back for our next session.
Great.
Thanks very much to the panel. I'd now like to welcome a very special guest, in my mind, Helen Rochford Brennan. Helen is a global dementia advocate, passionate for rights and inclusion of people living with dementia, and has been awarded an honorary doctorate of law, from the University of Galway for her outstanding work in advancing equality and the rights of people with dementia.
Has to come down a bit. Well, the first thing I have to do is change the glasses. And unfortunately, I have to read for you. So I think I'm missing someone here behind this. So I'll move this way. And what can I say after today? What a wonderful experience. First of all, I want to thank the University of Galway for giving me the opportunity to participate in PPI. And it began with the assisted decision making. For any of you that lived in the West, you might know me because I was a bit of a mouthpiece for challenging the government and anyone that listened for investing in the West as chair of the Western Development Commission. So when I first spoke publicly about my illness, I never imagined it would bring me here to close a national festival on public and patient involvement. Back then, I simply wanted people to understand what life was like with Alzheimer's and to discuss the rights of people with dementia. I wanted to speak truth to power and challenge the media on the perception of what we all look like. And I also hoped that maybe somebody would listen to me and that I could make an impact. I was a public voice since I returned to live in Ireland in 1995. Not just for Saving the West, but also for disability, for the rights of all people with disabilities. We didn't call it PPI back then. Back when I started, we didn't call it anything. We were just given our voice. So haven't we come a long way since 2013? So I speak all over the world today. I'm called a public voice, public engagement. I have so many titles now that I cannot tell you what PPI is really about. But to be fair, from once I started talking, as you know, I haven't stopped since. And I hope I'll have a few more years to keep doing it. Over the years, I've learned that being listened to and being heard are two vastly different things. True listening means our voices help shape what happens next. That's what PPI is really all about to me. The challenges that we had along the way, like all good journeys, ours hasn't been smooth, as you heard. But the PAB hasn't just been working on one research project. We've been trying to influence and change an entire organisation, and that's a far tougher task. Trying to change a whole organisation sometimes is like steering a cruise ship with a teaspoon. So when you're changing a whole system, there are layers upon layers, policies, personalities, priorities, and it can be hard to see the ripples of change straight away. Progress is real, but sometimes it's hidden under the surface, and it takes patience. I often remind myself, you must learn to walk before you can run. Some days it feels like we've been walking for miles in circles, but every small step has mattered. Mind you now, there are days I've walked enough to qualify for a marathon medal. And yes, there have been moments of frustration, especially when it feels like things aren't moving fast enough. But change, real change, doesn't happen in a single meeting or a report. It happens through persistence, trust, and partnership. So I want to talk a little bit about respect around the table. One thing I've learned is that respect is the heartbeat of PPI. Everyone around the table, researchers, clinicians, public contributors, bring something valuable, listening to each other, questioning each other in a reflective way. And that's how we grow. That's how I've grown. And sometimes that means biting your tongue long enough to really listen. Now, it's not my best skill, I have to admit. There's real strength in being able to say, I don't agree, but I listen. And that's what makes involvement, whatever kind of involvement you want to call it, powerful. Not everyone agrees, but when everyone feels safe to speak. I genuinely believe that PAB has made remarkable progress and had a real impact. But I'll be honest, it saddened me that not everyone in the group felt the same way. That's the thing about journeys, though, isn't it? We each experience them differently. Some see the mountain we've climbed, others see how far there is to go. And both views are true. But there were also times when I wasn't sure people really understood my illness, or whether my contribution really truly mattered. My processing is about 65%, or so the clinicians tell me. Now you're all on 100%. So I want to say I find it difficult to respond quickly. It's a much more slower process for me to respond. So therefore, I can't articulate as quick as everybody else in the group. That's tough. But resilience teaches me to keep going, to keep speaking up, to remind people that no journey is complete until everyone is on board. Indeed, some of us were left behind as the bus went by, but next time I'm going to reserve my seat and a big sign say, "Don't leave without me." For me, the heart of PPI is knowledge exchange, and it always has been. I speak to many organisations, from the World Health to Alzheimer's Disease International to European Parliament to European Mental Health, and I speak to them about knowledge exchange because that's really important. I was in Alzheimer's Europe last week, and we had a great panel up there, 5 men, you know yourself, ladies, and they were all talking about me. We're all talking about, and so anyway, at the end, I said to them, I stood up and thanked them for the contribution, and I said, I looked when I came in to see if there was any chair up the front for a person with dementia, and I said to them, you know, I'm a person with dementia and I want to have a little knowledge exchange here. So I want you to understand me and all the great things you spoke about. And I have to be honest with you. This is where our people power comes in. This is where public involvement matters. Matters for me is that all of a sudden these guys want to come and talk to me. Then they want to bring me up for a photograph. And it was like, thank you for speaking to us. We didn't realise what we have done is not correct, but we want you to know that we're really going to change this. And that's what matters. That's what public involvement. That's truly, truly what public involvement is to me. So we've all learned this on this great journey we've gone on. We've shared the knowledge born out of research, and knowledge, as I've said, born out of lived experience. That blend is where the breakthroughs happen. And that, to me, is the legacy we leave, a model of collaboration that others can follow. Now, if you could bottle it up, all the online meetings were great, between frozen screens, you were on mute, moments of laughter. I think we'd have something more powerful than a bottle of Jameson. Now, you all know I can't finish without talking about laughter. As research can be boring at times, I have years of it being boring, but we all experience it and we try to smile about it. In PAB, laughter has kept us going, from the long meetings to endless documents and the occasional difference of opinion. It reminds us that we're people first and researchers second. To the young researchers in the room, I'm going to address you. Don't forget to laugh, and don't be afraid to share a joke. I remember many years ago with Alzheimer's Europe, a bunch of young researchers coming into the room, and they thought we couldn't talk. They didn't realise we could speak. They didn't realise we could engage. And so they're sitting there looking very forlorn until we started cracking some jokes and telling them that it's okay, you can talk to us, you can ask anything. We may not remember what you want to ask us, but, we'll do our best. And, that's where they really learn, that's where they blossomed. So don't be afraid to engage with us. People with dementia, we don't remember everything, and we can't concentrate as much as we can, and we can't respond as quick as we can. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to reach out. Now, when I say to you, don't forget to laugh, I don't mean don't laugh at us. I'd prefer now if you laughed with us. So the toughest projects I've worked on were also the ones with most humour. And that humour is what carried us all through and made it effective research. So Charlie Chaplin once said, a day without laughter is a day wasted. In PPI, I'd say a day without laughter is losing heart. So for me, my personal reflection and what I want for the future, I hope, over time I realised that sharing my story wasn't just about my own story. It became part of something much bigger. Each talk, each meeting, each collaboration has helped turn lived experience into shared understanding. And that's why in PPI or V or whatever we want to call it, the lived experience matters. We can tell you what it's like to get up in the morning and what it's like to be all day. We began as a way to make sense for me of my own diagnosis. And it has become a mission to make sure others are truly heard. And that's what keeps me going, knowing that my voice can shape change and open doors for those who come after me. It hasn't always been easy, but the rewards, the friendships, the knowledge, the sense of purpose have been extraordinary. I want to keep doing this work for as long as my memory allows me, continue to be a public advocate, advocating so that the voice of people like me, people living with many different conditions, and people with lived experience are not just heard, but truly embedded in research and practice. And for that, of course, we will need support. So my closing, I said it was hope, legacy, and a smile. So as we close, here's what I've learned. We began with the dream. I know maybe it wasn't a dream, Adele. We've travelled this road together, sometimes uncertain, sometimes laughing at ourselves, but always, always moving forward. We built resilience, we shared hope, and we've created knowledge that outlive all of us. Yes, we created knowledge that will outlive all of us. That's our legacy. Not perfection, not progress, but silence. Not silence, but shared voices. And isn't that just wonderful? And if progress feels too slow, just remember at least we're moving in the right direction and nobody has been left on mute this time. As Tim Cahill once said, a journey is best measured in friends, not in miles. What a journey we've all had, and what good company we've had along the way. I will miss you all, and I hope we meet again on research. I know this is not the end of PPI, because it will go on for a while. But of course, my dream is the day will come soon that we don't have to be talking about PPI, that it will be truly embedded in every piece of research. And I know that Carmel and myself are very involved with funders. And when we see the applications, what is the first thing we look for? Well, where has PPI been involved? So I want to thank Sean Deneen. I want to thank Adele Murphy, for your leadership. I want to thank your team and the PAC team for the amazing support. And I also want to thank our great facilitator, Adele Tierney. It's been a wonderful journey for me, and I hope for all of you. And I just want you all to go home and remember that we've created knowledge that will outlive all of us. And what an achievement that is. Thank you again, and as we say up here, Mille Buíochas. Adele, thank you for your legacy.
So, Helen, wonderful. Thank you so much. On behalf of everyone here on the PAB, thank you for those lovely words. I was going to ask if anyone has a question for Helen at this time, or are we happy to let me ask a question? Helen, I have a question for you. This morning, Derek, in his presentation, talked about sharing space at the table. And I know you've had some really witty words about this. So from a PPI perspective, what does that look like for you?
Well, I definitely don't want to share space at the table. I want a voice at the table. And I want to be equal, as I should be, with everybody else. And yes, I have different ways of addressing that. But sometimes we're asked to the table and we're not really asked any questions. And that's difficult because we can contribute. We can still share our voice. So there's no point in inviting me to something that my voice is not as equal as everybody else at the table.
Thanks, Helen. Is there okay. Now, let me see. Oops. Now what's happened? I don't know why there's a James on the screen.
Do you want slides?
Yes, I don't know why.
Have you slides up there?
No, I don't. This. Okay.
So you just put up the last one and you just talk. It's all yours now. Just
Perfect. Okay, so we're almost at the end of the day. I hope everyone really, really enjoyed what was presented today. At the start of the day, Edel talked about having a goal of fun, humour, listening to the public voice, and building skill sets for PPI contributors. We also talked about we are living the dream for PPI. So I'm sure everyone here could spend days talking about this, and we could go on forever, because when you get involved in PPI, you're so passionate about it and you get consumed by it. So I just want to say a few words about reflections on the day. We really had the opportunity to celebrate the PAB, as well as the wider PPI voice, and what has happened since the PPI Ignite Network was established. We've celebrated collaboration, friendship, engagement, learnings, and the growth of PPI in research, as well as acknowledging the challenges. This morning, before lunch, we heard of past stories from today, workshops explored, 4 wonderful workshops, which showed us new ways to collaborate with the diversity of PPI that get involved. And we've had this afternoon the panel who discussed the future of PPI. So this morning, Edel talked about the dream of involving PPI in research. And for me, when I look back on this, I would say to myself that Dr. Anne Cody of the HRB cultivated that field. And Edel and Professor Sean Deneen planted the seed. And that dream became a reality for those 3 humans and so many more humans today. And I'd like, if people will put their hands together, please, and a round of applause. It's so important. The reality of that ripple in the water facilitated building a community of like-minded people. Cameron spoke of involvement being meaningful. Derek talked about being unique, bringing unique qualities to the table. The PAB this morning acknowledged the challenges, the start of a national movement for PPI, good friends and impact. So this is not a destination, it's a journey. As phase 2 of the PPI Ignite Network comes to a close, we hope that the guardians of phase 3 build on the progress of the work of the PAB. You heard Anne in the previous group saying that this is not the end of the PAB. It might be the end of the PAB in one shape, but it will it'll be rebirthed in a new format. And we hope that the Guardians will grow PPI across marginalised minority groups and support PPI involvement. So finally, on behalf of the organising group of the PAB, Edel Tierney and the 3 from the National Office, I like when Edel, we talk about the 3, but I would like to mention Casey, Edel and John. A huge thank you to all who has joined us here in Galway, for the people online. There's so many people that have contributed to today. It wouldn't have happened without us all being here and people contributing to the various aspects of the event. There's so many people, when we talk about the support staff that are here, supporting us online, supporting the technology, Zoom, and so on. We'd like to thank them. And we'd like to thank the PPI Ignite Network here in Galway, who, through their festival funding, seed funding, helped with the costs. And of course, the HRB, who are the main funders of the PPI Ignite Network. I want to thank ILAS and the University of Galway for the space to host this event. Station House Media recorded it. We'd also like to get some feedback from all of you that attended online and here today, and we will be sending out a feedback form. And please give us your positives and negatives of the event, and everything is an opportunity for further improvement. And finally, please leave your lanyard at the main door. We are all into sustainability in the ecosystem. So, many thanks. Safe home, everybody.